Welcome, everybody, to Week 6 of the NFL Pick'em Show on the Gruely Truth Sports Network. The NFL Weekly Pick'em Show is brought to you by Replenishing Care Technologies, the future of sports medicine. To find out more about Replenishing Care and all their products, go to thegruelingtruth.net, click on the banner. I am one of your co-hosts for the NFL Weekly Pick'em Show, Mike Goodpaster, and we're a little short tonight. Tony Pike had a family situation he had to take care of. Matt, he's a sucker and he's got a real job. So that leaves the two guys without real jobs here, myself and Brian Schmidt. How you doing, Schmitty?
Yeah, I don't know if we're smart or if we're not smart that we don't have real jobs.
I think we're smart.
I feel smart, but
Yeah, I feel smart too, because we just kind of hang out and talk about football while everybody else has to work. But
true.
All right.
True.
So let's talk about Week 5 a little bit. Are the Steelers back, or are the Falcons just a sinking ship?
Boy, that's going to be an interesting question. They played well. Again, they do this they've done this, it seems like every year the last 4 or 5 years. They start out kind of, and all of a sudden they get a win like this, but I don't know. I think we're going to find out a lot about them this week. Another big game. But what an interesting week. How do the Bills win?
Hey, and I did pick the Packers over the Lions over the Packers, and I think I was the only one.
Yep, Lions over the Packers. The Browns win on a knuckleball. That Panthers-Giants game was a great game. The Cardinals over the 49ers. But, what's going on with the Eagles? That is a very interesting situation there.
You know what I think, real quick? I think a lot of the problem is their window to win it, I think, ended last year. If you look at them, the offensive line is old. And they're playing old, and that defense isn't near as good as what it was. Plus, you get the injuries in the offensive backfield.
Yeah. I think, it's going to be interesting to see because, you hear a lot of trade rumors now. Obviously, Bell was a trade rumor. Johnson from the Cardinals was a trade rumor. You hear a lot of trade rumors. It's going to be interesting to see what they do to kind of fix this. But the Rams. The Rams find a way to win games. When they don't play their best, especially defensively. 31 points against the Seahawks, but they still find a way to win. Just interesting. I really did. Watching the Bengals against the Dolphins. It started off not so well, but they kicked it in and did exactly what we thought they would do. So it was an interesting Week 5.
Yeah, and I think the two things that stood out to me were, Sean McVay has balls and Jason Garrett doesn't. Jason Garrett's 4th and 1 on the 42 going in overtime, and he punts the ball. Right there as a guy that's playing not to lose. And, look, McVay, almost the same situation. He goes for it and puts the game away.
Yep.
And
it's funny because when we look at some of the coaches in this league, Garrett is what he is. He's been that way, but yet he's still in Dallas. McVay's a guy that just flings it from the hip, and this is why the Rams, they were a very good team last year. I think they're better this year, and this is why they win because they don't sit back and just wait for it to happen. They make it happen, and we've seen that almost from really the time they took over to now. It's just the way they attack everything. So I think they're definitely a team that could play for the Super Bowl this year. I really do.
Yeah, and of course the Patriots look like they're back in the mix. They've got weapons all over the place now with Edelman and Gordon, Sonny Michel. And then the New Orleans Saints last night. Drew Brees sets the all-time passing record. Also throws. Did he throw his 500th touchdown pass last night too?
Yeah, I don't think he did. I could be wrong.
I bet the game and was given 6 points, and once it got to be like 37-13, I just turned it off because I knew my money was safe.
Yeah, I watched the first half, watched him set the record, and then I kind of tuned out. And what about Kansas City? Kansas City is and I say this because we've seen Kansas City do this before, and then by the end of the season, they're trash. But this team has a very different feel this year when you watch them. I think that this is not the same kind of team that we've seen in the past from Kansas City. So
I think we'll know that for sure after this week and next week, because this week and next week they go to New England, they host Cincinnati, both primetime games. Patrick Mahomes didn't look as good yesterday, but Blake Bortles was god-awful, Brian. Blake Bortles
goodness.
He was the reason the Chiefs' defense all of a sudden looked good.
I don't know that he could. There are times with him that I'm not sure he could throw it in the ocean from the beach. He just, and then there are other times when he looks pretty good. At least a guy that can manage. The one thing with him is if he would just manage the game, let their defense have the opportunity. I mean, they'd be so much better. But sometimes he wants to play bigger than he is, and every time he does that, it goes downhill.
Yeah, one time he looks great, the other time he looks terrible. That's why I don't think you can really take Jacksonville seriously just because of that. That and the fact that Leonard Fournette seems like he is always injured. He was like that in college, and it doesn't look like that's going to change anytime soon.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that's something that we're going to see. We're going to see a difference. I mean, he may have 1 year where he doesn't play injured, but I think he's just going to be one of those kind of players that's always going to have injury issues.
All right, Brian, let's go ahead and get to the Week 6 games. The first game is a battle in the NFC East, which is one of the worst divisions in football, I think. Two sub-500 teams, the Philadelphia Eagles at 2-3, will travel to East Rutherford, New Jersey, to play the New York Giants, who are 1-4. The Giants played well against the Panthers, but they lose on a Graham Gano 63-yard field goal. This is a must-win for both of these teams, especially the Giants. Who do you like here?
I like the Eagles. Maybe not as much as I would have. We were talking about this game even 2 or 3 weeks ago. But I like the Eagles. Like the Giants, I mean, they in that game being on here in Carolina, I mean, they played out of their minds. The double pass to back to Shaquille, whatever. Brain just shut down on me. Barkley. Things like that. They did some things, but their offensive line is garbage. It's still garbage. Defensively, they're not great. The Eagles haven't looked great either, but you got to feel like they've got a little bit more than the Giants. So I'm going to take the Eagles.
All right, I don't know what I'm going to do here because neither one of these teams are what I thought they would be. I thought the Giants would be a little bit better. I thought the Eagles would be one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the NFC. Neither one of those things have turned out. I'm going to take a flyer. I'm going to go with Eli Manning and the Giants to win this game. I think it's a must-win for him. 2-4 is not a death sentence in the NFC East because the way it's looking now, 8 or 9 games will win the NFC East. So I'm going to go with the upset and the Giants. That brings us next to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons are in a tailspin. The Buccaneers were in a tailspin until they ran into the bye week. Brian, I'm going to go with Atlanta here just because they're at home.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Atlanta, but there's a very strong part of me that doesn't want to. They just have not impressed me.
I know.
But I am going to go. I will go with. I'll go with the Falcons, but this is another one of those that's not going to surprise me. Yeah, it will not surprise me if Tampa Bay wins this game.
Yeah, well, after the way the Falcons looked, especially this last week, nothing would surprise me with them. Next up, Baker Mayfield and the Cleveland Browns. And they're delusional fans that think now they're in the AFC North race will host the Los Angeles Chargers. When I look at this game, Brian, the thing that stands out to me is the Chargers are going to score more than 9 or 12 points. I don't know if the Browns can. I know everybody talks about they got Jarvis Landry, they got these receivers, they got Mayfield. I like Mayfield. But in the end, kind of like the Giants, the offensive line's not very good. I think the Chargers go there and beat them.
Yeah, I do too. Look, I've never been a Browns fan, but I do like Baker Mayfield. However, the Chargers to me are just so much more of a complete team, and I'll be honest, the Browns had that tie against Pittsburgh. They win last week on a knuckleball field goal, playing Baltimore that I really did not expect that Baltimore to play the way they did. But at the end of the day, the Browns are just they've got pieces, but they just don't have enough pieces to be a consistent team.
All right, so we agree on the Chargers in that one. Next up, the Indianapolis Colts, who they've played well at times. Andrew Luck's looked good, I think, especially considering being gone for 2 years. They will go to New York to host to play the Jets, led by Sam Darnold. The Jets beat the Broncos last week. I don't know how they did it when you look at the stats. Who do you got here, Schmitty? Jets or Colts?
I'm gonna take the Jets just because they're at home, but this is a tough one too because, as you said, I think the Colts at times they've looked really well. Andrew Luck has looked good. The Jets, have been another hit and miss at times, but I feel like being at home, I'm going to take the Jets. But again, this is another one this week that it would not surprise me if the Colts win.
Nice job. I'm going to go with Andrew Luck. I mean, I watched the Colts against the Bengals, and they looked good until they fumbled the game away late. I thought offensively they looked all right against the Patriots. They scored 24 points. So I'm going to take a flyer. I'm going to take the Colts to win this game. I'm going to put my money on Luck and let it ride and see what happens. Next up, the Seattle Seahawks will go to Oakland to face the Oakland Raiders. The Oakland Raiders are also at a tailspin, Brian. And I think in this one, I'm going to ride with what I think is the better quarterback. Russell Wilson, to me, has proven he's elite just by being 2-3 with this team and almost beating the Rams. If you watch him, he's doing this basically on his own with no running game, very little receiving help. The defense is no longer the Legion of Doom. I like Russell Wilson to somehow win this game, Brian.
Yeah, I don't know how you can really go with the Raiders against most teams at this point. I just don't think they're a very good team. And yeah, I mean, they're just not. And I agree with Seattle. It's not the same team, but I'm gonna take a Russell Wilson led team in this game more than I'm gonna take anything from the Raiders right now because I think the Raiders, well, they may not be the worst team in the NFL. They are certainly in in that area.
Five. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'll take the Seahawks.
All right, next up, we got the Carolina Panthers, who I believe have started out the season 4-1 at the Washington Redskins, who just took a beating by the New Orleans Saints. Also lost to the Colts earlier in the year. Who do you like in this one, Brian?
I'm going to go with Carolina. I watched that Carolina Giants game, and what a great game it was. And really, quite frankly, that 63-yard kick bailed them out from what was an absolute horrendous play call. Horrendous play call. I think, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, they run the football, barely get the first down, which at first glance, that looked like maybe that wasn't a first down. Now you got to kick a 63-yard field goal to win, and really, honestly, that kick could have been good from 70.
Oh, yeah, he kicked the hell out of that ball.
Oh, he crushed it. And when they showed it on the slow-mo, I mean, it literally, that was one of the more crushed kicks that I think I've ever seen. I mean, just came off his foot like a bomb.
Yeah, it's one of the few 63-yarders you see when it's kicked. Your first thought is, "Damn, he just made that."
Oh yeah, I mean when that thing got kicked, that thing went up in the air. It was like, that's good. And actually, one of our guys, his brother plays for the Panthers, and he was there, and he said when that thing came off his foot, I mean where he was sitting, he said everybody knew it was good. It wasn't one of those 63 where you're waiting to see it. Everybody knew that thing was good. So yeah, I'm still in this. I'm going to take Carolina. I just not really, big on the Redskins. I like Carolina. I like what they do. They've done some things offensively. They don't have that. A lot of people talk about they don't have that explosive, receivers and things like that. But one thing about Cam Newton, I've never been a huge Cam Newton guy, but he plays so much more under control now than he ever has. And that's the one thing that really comes out. So they're able to really do some things with the running game, with the passing game. And the Redskins, like I said, I'm not a big fan of. I just don't feel like they've really done a lot to impress me enough that I think they're going to be a factor.
Yeah, I agree on this one. I think the Panthers win this one going away. Next up, the Buffalo Bills, who have somehow managed to win 2 games at the Houston Texans. On this one, Brian, I'm taking Houston because I still think Buffalo is maybe the worst 2-win team I've ever seen.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Texans, but I'm still trying to figure out how Buffalo has won 2 games. I really just don't get it. They look so unimpressive anytime you see them. So I'll take the Texans. The Texans haven't exactly
no.
At times fostered a lot of feelings of impressiveness, but surely they got to be way better than the Bills.
Yeah, and next up, we've got another team that I think is right there with the Bills. The Arizona Cardinals will go to Minnesota to play the Vikings, and I think just because of what happened earlier in the season with the Buffalo Bills, I think the Vikings take care of business here and crush the Cardinals, Brian.
Yeah, I would too. I think that, Minnesota is not going to let that happen twice, so I'll take Minnesota at home.
All right, next up, the Chicago Bears, who are 3-1, sit atop the NFC North and may be the most improved team in the NFL, will go to the Miami Dolphins, who are now 3-2 after getting crushed by the Patriots, blowing a 17-point lead with a minute or 2 left in the third quarter against the Bengals. When I look at this, Brian, I don't think the Dolphins are that good. I think the Bears are an up-and-coming team. I think the Bears win this.
I think the Bears win this. And the thing about the Dolphins is I think, when they had their start, there were so many people that kind of jumped on that and really, you never did, I never did, because they're just not that kind of team that you look at and go, hey, yeah, they've changed things around. They got some, a couple lucky breaks early, but to me, they're just not that good. They're a middle-of-the-road team. And I agree, the Bears are up and coming, but the thing about the Bears is, they're not going to kill you on the offensive side, but they sure as heck are going to kill you defensively. And I don't think the Dolphins just have enough to deal with that defense, to be honest with you.
All right, next up, the Baltimore Ravens at the Tennessee Titans in a battle of 2 teams that were absolutely horrible on offense this last weekend, Brian.
Yeah, after what the Ravens, have done, how do you score 6 points against the Browns? That was interesting.
How do you always score 12 points against the freaking Bills? So, I mean, both teams are in the same boat here.
Oh, absolutely. There's still that part of me. I want to take the Ravens, but I'm going to take the Titans in this. I feel like being at home, and I feel like they're not as bad as they looked against the Bills, and I think that this to me, I think this may be a little bit of an upset, but I think the Titans can win this one at home.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I'm going to take the Titans also. Maybe it's just because I want them to lose. So when the Bengals win this week, we'll be up 2 and 3.5 on those two teams. I'm going to take the Titans also. Next up, we've got the Los Angeles Rams at the Denver Broncos. The Broncos gave the Chiefs a run a couple weeks ago. Can they give the Rams a run?
No. The Rams just have too many weapons offensively. They're a much better defense than what they showed against Seattle. I think the Rams are one of the top 2 or 3 teams wherever you want to put them. They're one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the NFL. So I also don't think the Broncos will have enough.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to go with the Rams. I think it could be a close game, but I think the Rams will get them in the end. I just think the Broncos' defense is older than what it was. And Case Keenum is not a guy that's going to carry you unless you get a lot of parts around him. And I don't think they have enough parts around him. Next up, the Jacksonville Jaguars coming off a bad loss in Kansas City this last week. We'll play the Dallas Cowboys, who are coming off a bad loss in Houston, Brian.
Here's the thing is, when I looked at the schedule for next week and I saw this game, I immediately, my first thought is I don't even know who to pick in this. Because my first thought process is definitely not the Cowboys.
But there's definitely not Blake Bortles either.
But Blake Bortles is just, when he is off, it's atrocious. And even when he's average, it's not great. But boy, when he's off, it's really bad. But yet, at the same time, certainly Dallas doesn't do a whole lot to impress you either. With this, I am going to take the Cowboys at home. And I still, if you would ask me this question 5 minutes later, I probably could give you a different answer. But I'm going to take the Cowboys at home.
Yeah, I don't know when I look at this. I'm going to go with the Jaguars because I think Bortles is better than what he was last week because he has to be. And I think from his history, he's inconsistent. So I'm going to hope he gets hot and throws a couple touchdown passes. Because really with the Cowboys, there's no offense there except for Ezekiel Elliott. I still think Dak Prescott is good. I just don't think he's got the wide receivers to do anything. I think he's got a bunch of guys that are number 3s and 4s for other teams. So I'm going to go with the Jaguars. Next up, and we're going to save the Steelers, Bengals, Chiefs, Patriots for the last 2 games we picked because I think those are heads and shoulders the 2 biggest games of this week. We're going to go to Monday Night Football, where the San Francisco 49ers will go to the Green Bay Packers. And you know that ESPN's got to be upset about this matchup right now, Brian.
Yeah, this one does not foster a lot of viewership. Obviously, I'm going to take the Packers at home. 49ers were, I felt before the injuries, I felt, they were a team that was getting better, but they were still an average team. Now with the injuries and everything else, this is a bad team, and the Packers I don't think are gonna lose 2 in a row. So I'll take the Packers.
Yeah, but I think the Packers could easily lose 2 in a row if they were playing somebody because I don't think either one of these teams is any good.
Absolutely. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think there's major problems between Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy. I think there's also major problems with the Packers roster. The defense is not that good. The secondary is bad. The offensive line doesn't protect Rodgers that good. They got rid of Jordy Nelson as number one receiver in the offseason. I'm going to take the Packers, but I think it'll look about like the Bills game a couple weeks ago where it's like 20-0 or 20-6, 20-7. And I will probably choose not to watch it because I'm sure I can find something better to do. All right, let's go to the two biggest games of the week. We'll start off with the co-main event. The Pittsburgh Steelers, 2-2-1, will travel to Cincinnati to play the Bengals, who are 4-1. And I would think this game, Brian, has to be a must-win for Pittsburgh because if you lose this game, you're 3 games out of first place.
Yeah, this is a must-win. Somewhat early in the season. It is definitely going to be a tough. I like when I've watched this Bengals team. I like them. I like what they do offensively. A lot of weapons. That's the one thing about this game that concerns me because Pittsburgh does not do well defensively against any appreciable amount of weapons, and the Bengals have it. However, the one thing about this rivalry has been it seems like when the Bengals should win, they don't. And likewise,
they don't too, because I think Pittsburgh's won 9 of the last 10.
No, well, I'll say this: there have been times when Pittsburgh should win and haven't as well, or they've definitely had one of those crazy games. So I mean, it is a must-win. I will say I'm going to take Pittsburgh, but I'm not confident with that pick. But I will take Pittsburgh.
Well, I think this. When you look at the two teams, I think the Bengals are better. But I think this is a must-win for the Bengals also. I know they're 4-1, and even if they lose the game, they're still in first place over Pittsburgh. But the reason I think this is a must-win is if they lose this game, everybody goes back to just saying it's the same old Bengals. They had an opportunity to drive a stake in the heart, and they didn't do it. And I think if this team lets this get away at this point, that it will come back to haunt them. It will haunt them the rest of the season. It'll haunt them in Kansas City. The next thing you know, they're 4-3, and they're a half game behind Pittsburgh. And everything goes to hell from there because Marvin Lewis in the past has not been able to get this done when it needed to be done. So right now you've got a team that, against the Colts, makes a huge play to win the game at the end of the game. They have a huge fourth quarter comeback, last drive, 80 yards in like a minute and a half to beat the Falcons. And then they're down 17-0 with 2 minutes left in the third quarter against Miami. And the next thing you know, with 3 minutes left in the game, it's over. So this is a team that has done things differently. It feels different, but they have to win this game for it to be different. It can feel different all day long, but until they beat Pittsburgh, and it doesn't matter that they're better, because when you look at it, I mean, you're a Steelers fan, but I'm pretty sure you would take Joe Mixon over your guy. Defensive line-wise, Geno Atkins, Carlos Dunlap, I don't think there's a better tackle in combination in the league, including against the Rams. And that is really, you add in Sam Hubbard. The defensive line, I think, is better. Offensive line-wise, I think Pittsburgh's better, but they haven't played better this year necessarily. Big Ben is not as good as Dalton now. I'm not saying historically Andy Dalton's better than Big Ben Roethlisberger, but I'm just saying right now you're probably in the prime of Andy Dalton's career, and you're at the end of Big Ben's career. Defensive back-wise, I mean, if Joe Hayden gets hurt, all hell breaks loose.
With Joe Hayden, they are, and Joe Hayden is very good, but even with Joe Hayden can't cover everybody.
Yeah, but without Joe Hayden, they're giving up 40 points. With Joe Hayden, they're probably giving up 30.
Joe Hayden, yeah. With Joe Hayden, they can, and against Atlanta was a great example. I mean, they weren't great, But with Joe Hayden and everything, it at least solidified them enough that it wasn't, obviously it wasn't a total abomination. But you take Joe Hayden out of the equation, and it's going on air. So definitely, I feel like, I'll take Pittsburgh, but it's a huge game for both teams. But, for Pittsburgh, their back is against the wall. If you win this game, it was kind of like last week winning against Atlanta, and this becomes even a bigger thing. If you win this game, it kind of takes everything that's happened in the first 4 or 5 weeks, and you're kind of able to go, okay, you know what, we've got things back on track. They're going to go into the bye week. Bell's supposed to be back. Everything kind of calms down. If you lose this game, you go into the bye week, and it's going to be the same questions and the same
You're
things.
3 games out. Does Le'Veon Bell want to come back and play? And everybody's pissed off at each other.
Exactly. So it's a huge game. And the one thing I will say this, and you and I have talked about this many times, I'm not the biggest Mike Tomlin fan at all. I feel the same way about Tomlin that you do about Lewis. But I will say the one thing about Tomlin that has been a positive in his career is many times when Pittsburgh's backs have been against the wall in this situation, they tend to win more than they lose, because he is that kind of a coach that will take situations like this and he's able to get them to play at that level with their back against the wall. The problem has been with Pittsburgh many times is when they should win and their backs aren't against the wall, they play like crap. And that's probably the only thing that I can say about Tomlin that's good, is when the backs have been against the wall, they've won way more games than they've lost. So I'll take Pittsburgh, but I'm not – the Bengals winning is not going to shock me. But I do agree with you that if the Bengals lose this game, now all of a sudden that could, spark some issues in Cincinnati. So really this game is such a huge game on both sides.
I mean, this game, and this may sound nuts because Baltimore is actually in second place right now, I think this game could decide the AFC North.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at it, the next couple weeks, which leads us to our next game, is going to decide, who is the clear front runner in the AFC. Because next up, we got Sunday night, the Kansas City Chiefs will travel to New England, Foxborough, to play the New England Patriots. And when I look at this game, Brian, I think this is a clear New England win. I don't think Kansas City's defense is good enough to stop them. I think Kansas City will score points, but when it comes down to it, I'm going to go with Tom Brady's 5 Super Bowl wins over Patrick Mahomes' 5 regular season wins.
Yeah, I agree with with the Patriots winning this game, and my reasoning is it's just simply, the Patriots in games like this, more times than not, they win, and the reason they win is because they're the Patriots. You've got Tom Brady, you've got Belichick. There's a reason why they've done the things they've done, and these are the games where they prove it every time. There are a lot of people out there right now that truly think that the Chiefs are going to win this game. Until the New England Patriots consistently show that they can no longer win these games, they are very hard to go against, because they have won these games every single time. Most every single time.
Well, even if the Chiefs win this game, I would still bet on the Patriots in a playoff game in Kansas City against them, just because they're the Patriots. Yeah. I mean, look at it. A few weeks ago, Jacksonville looked like a heads and shoulders above the Patriots team. They don't look like that anymore.
No, and we said it back then. everybody was jumping on, every time it happens, they jump on is this the end of New England now? You're talking about a week 2, week 3, whatever week it was game. You cannot judge the New England Patriots on week 2 or 3. Until they're going to be a team that, until consistently it can be proven that they're just not going to win. That they're not going to win, you have to bet on the Patriots because they find ways to win, and they've got weapons now they didn't have against Jacksonville. You give Tom Brady those kind of weapons with Edelman and Gordon. You give him all those weapons. It's a much different offense.
Yeah, and I'm going with the Patriots. I just right now, the best teams in the AFC to me look like New England, Kansas City, Cincinnati, and with the possibility of Pittsburgh jumping up there, possibility the Chargers jump up there. But outside of that, I think those to me are the teams that I think have the best shot to make it to a Super Bowl out of the AFC.
Yeah, I agree. A long way to go but a long way to go. But those teams, to me, I think on paper are just far and away better than everybody else.
Now, when you look at the NFC, you get the Rams and who else? I think the Vikings, the way they've started to play, if Cousins be consistent, has to be in there. I like the Saints also. What's your take on, do you agree with those three? And would you throw the Panthers in?
I would say the Rams definitely number 1. I think now you get into who's number 2. I think you can make a case for everybody. I don't know that I would put the Panthers quite yet, but I think I definitely think they're in the conversation as we go. To me, the Rams are just so much better than everybody else.
Yeah, but don't you think the injuries in the defensive backfield have kind of brought them back to the pack too?
A little bit, but until somebody figures out how to slow up this offense, they can play right now to outscore people a little bit. And I think their defense, as these injuries, as things start to heal up and as we go, they'll kind of get back there. And I do agree with you with New Orleans as well. New Orleans, I think, is always going to be in that conversation this year. But, right now, I think the Rams are a much better team than everybody in NFC. I do think, yes, they came back to the pack a little bit with the injuries, but they're still awfully good. Those injuries for a lot of teams would bring you not only back to the pack, but would bring you to the middle of the pack, and they're still awful good.
Yeah, because when you look at it, they haven't really played any great defensive teams, but I thought the Chargers are a very good defensive team. They're missing Bosa. They still put 35 on them. And when you look at the Rams the rest of the season, I mean, they do go here in a few weeks. November the 4th, they travel to New Orleans, which will be a tough game. Then they host Kansas City April the 19th. They go to Chicago December 9th. And they host Philadelphia December 16th. Really, when I look at this, everybody always loses a game they shouldn't lose, so they'll probably do that. This is at least a 12-4 team. At least. Probably better than that.
I'd say 12-4 at least. 13-3, I think, is very realistic. Of those games you mentioned, the one that's the most intriguing to me that I could see being one of their losses is the Bears.
Yeah.
You going to Chicago, you're gonna, by that point, you said that was what, December?
Yeah, December the 9th.
Yeah, I mean, we all know weather in Chicago in December can be anywhere from 50 degrees to minus 50 and 27 inches of snow.
Yeah, there's a better chance of the latter.
Yes. So now that changes everything. On top of, if you just put it in a neutral, normal situation, the Bears' defense is awful good. So that's one that I think very, very easily could be a loss. I think
the Saints is too. I think the Bears and the Saints are the two losses you're looking at. And they'll lose one game along the way we don't expect them to lose, and they go 13-3, and they're the
Right.
number 1 seed.
Right. Now I can see that, especially going to New Orleans. I could see that being a loss very easily. So, but still, you're talking about a 13-3 team. You know, if everything goes the way we think, you're talking about a 13-3 team, and if they don't, have any more major injuries, they get some of these guys back. That's a very dangerous team in the playoffs. That is definitely a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, and I think their schedule is much easier than the Saints also. Because you look at the Saints, they go to Baltimore, which I think they should win. But they go to Minnesota. They go to Cincinnati. They host the Rams. I mean, they've got the next 4 weeks for the Saints are at the Rams, at the Vikings, host the Rams, at the Bengals, and then you go out 5 weeks, and they are hosting the Eagles. So, I mean, it's going to be hard to make a run there. And at the end of the year, you still got a home and home with the Panthers twice, which is, I think, the 14th week and the 15th and 17th week. Plus, if the Pittsburgh Steelers get it together, they host Pittsburgh also in December. So I think the advantage here is with the Rams, because I think the Rams' schedule is much easier than the Saints.
Yeah, I would agree. It is much easier, but boy, don't discount a team like the Saints, because that's they're a team that, especially at home, they can beat anybody. They've proven that time and time again.
Yeah, and now with the ability to run the ball, they're a better road team than what they were in the past.
Oh, absolutely. Look, it's a very good team, and it's going to be, as we get through the season with some of these big games that are coming up, it's going to be, quite interesting to watch, to see just how good they can be. I could see them with 5 losses. I could see them with 5 losses, maybe even 6 losses. But if they stay healthy, that's another team in the playoffs that you could see a Rams Saints game in the playoffs that could be a great game. That when they play each other, that's certainly a game that I'm going to want to watch, because that's 2 great offenses and 2 really solid teams that those are the fun games to watch in the NFL. We don't see as many of those as we used to, so those are the games that I enjoy watching.
Yeah, plus, I mean, hell, the Cleveland Browns have a rally possum.
Yeah, where'd that come from?
I don't know. That'll just tell you how pathetic the Cleveland Browns and their fans are. And they're still not going to win more than 5 games. Let's face it.
The funny thing about that,
home. The other win was against the freaking Jets. So
I heard something about that whole route, and I thought it was a joke. And then I guess maybe it was a little bit later that day or whatever. Then I guess I saw it, and I guess it's really not a joke. And I really did think it was. I was hoping it was, because that's a little pathetic.
Yeah, but it is the Cleveland Browns, and it's kind of, I don't know, I get some sadistic kick out of watching the ends of their games. And when you flip it on Cleveland and Baltimore, and you find out, well, they missed an extra point, or the game would have already been won. The field goal kicker comes in to kick it to win the game, and you see the looks on the fans and the faces, and none of them really believe he's going to make it. And then he shanks it really bad. And then finally, when he makes it, what is like a 30-yarder, it goes like 2 yards off the ground, barely goes over the thing. And I'm sorry, when I watched the Cleveland Browns, I read an article today on like ESPN or NFL.com that was asking what was the biggest reason from the Browns' turnaround from cellar dwellers to AFC North contender. And they're not an AFC North contender. They're just not.
Yeah, that's another one of those, and we brought this up on our CFL show, but I think sometimes the media really, again, is it mediocrity? You know, we talked about the same thing in CFL, and I mean, you almost say it in the NFL. Is it, you know, how far is it, a difference between, mediocrity and, having this competitive balance? I look at the NFL. I'm not sure that I'm convinced that, to me, it's not parity. There's a lot of mediocrity.
No, everybody sucks. It's nothing like it used to be. I mean, hell, Brian, no. You grew up in the 70s where, like, the Raiders, the Dolphins, who else were studs back then? The Cowboys. I mean, there was like 5 legendary teams for that entire decade. And you had teams that were great teams, like the Houston Oilers of the late 70s, the Bengals in the mid-70s, the Patriots in the mid-70s, who couldn't even sniff a Super Bowl because as soon as they would get good and win 10 or 11 games, they'd have to play Pittsburgh or Oakland or Miami, and it would be lights out.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing is again, when you get to that conversation of parity versus mediocrity, to me, they're both the same. I think when people use the term parity, it's really just a nice way of saying mediocrity.
They go together.
I don't think the NFL is better with mediocrity. I think the NFL was better when you had teams like Oakland, Pittsburgh, Miami, and then you had that next group of teams, like you said, Houston, Cincinnati, New England, because at the end of the day, to me, when you have all these 8-8 teams or 9-7 teams, to me it's watered down the game to the point that it is unwatchable. How much in the 70s did you enjoy? Pittsburgh, when Pittsburgh would play, New England, or Pittsburgh would play Oakland, or Oakland would play Cincinnati, and you knew that it was going to be a great game because you had 2 great teams going. Now, I mean, you talk about 3 or 4 teams is great, and the rest of them, it just goes downhill. And even the great teams aren't great like they were back then. I mean, New England is we talk about New England a lot, but I don't know that
one New England team that I've ever seen that I thought was one of the top 10 teams of all time.
Correct.
Not one.
Correct. And you can say that. I mean, you can say that. A lot of teams every year. People want to talk about these. Well, New England's a great team, or this year, they talk about the Rams. And look, put those teams back into the 70s. And I know people hate those comparisons, different eras, blah, 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 blah. But, man, oh, man.
How about this? So 1977. I looked it up. NFL.com. Number 1 lists the second-place team in the AFC Central in 1977 as the Titans, which is bullshit because they didn't play then. It was the Houston Oilers. But if you look at 77, the Steelers won the division at 9-5. The Oilers were 8-6. The Bengals were 8-6. The Browns were 6-8. All 4 good teams. The AFC East, you had the Colts at 10-4, the Dolphins at 10-4, and the Dolphins didn't even make the playoffs at 10-4. The Patriots at 9-5, who were a great football team also. And you go to the AFC West. The Broncos won the division at 12-2. You get the Raiders at 11-3, and then the start of the Don Coryell, Air Coryell Chargers at 7-7. And you look at this, and I mean, the Steelers, the Bengals, the Oilers, the Colts, the Dolphins, the Patriots. I mean, the Broncos, Raiders. There was like 8 really good teams there. And today, when I look at the AFC and you ask me who's going to be in the Super Bowl, to me it's going to be between the Patriots, the Chiefs, the Bengals, the Steelers, maybe the Jaguars. I mean, there's like 5 teams, and really the only one I'm sold on that I just brought up is the Patriots, because I could see the Chiefs and Bengals falling apart like they normally do. I mean, the Steelers have already fallen apart, so we don't know if they can bring it back together. So when people say it's because you're old and that's what you remember and you think it's so much better, no, I look at this and I mean, the Steelers, the Bengals, the Colts, the Dolphins, the Patriots, the Broncos, and Raiders. Those are all really good football teams. That's 7. Right now, really good football teams, you got 3 or 4. And, I mean, that's sad compared to what it used to be.
And take the teams from now, and again, people hate when this gets said, but if you take teams from now and you play them against teams that we were just bringing up, way different football and way different teams, because those teams were dominant, good,
physical,
solid teams in every phase of the game. Physical, and yes, different NFL, but man, it was a different time, and what we're seeing right now is to me, the NFL is not good being so mediocre. And right now, to me, the NFL, from virtually the top, and I'll save room for New England and things like that, but really from maybe the 4th or 5th best team in the league all the way down, it is mediocre. And I don't know. It's not the same, and a lot of these teams. And I think that's what's making it not as enjoyable as it once was, because it's just
not as enjoyable as it once was.
Not enjoyable. I mean, it really isn't. It's just not the same. And and again, now we can get into the whole thing about the rules being different and all that.
Yeah, but the rules don't matter.
You know,
I mean, the players they don't tackle as well. I don't even want to talk about the rules because the rules are stupid. Rules are stupid in and of itself. I hate rules. Rules are dumb. But when I look at this, my point is I did an NFL Power Rankings today, which I do every Tuesday, and it's really hard to differentiate. I didn't say that right. You know what I mean. Between almost any of these teams, you go to the bottom: San Francisco, Arizona, Oakland, Tampa Bay, Indianapolis, Buffalo. I could go down like 8 or 9 teams that could be the worst team. And when I go to the best team, though, I got the Chiefs and the Rams, the Saints. But, I mean, really, the only 2 to me that belong there are the Chiefs and the Rams. I mean, the Saints, they started out, they barely beat the Browns. They had some rough times early in the season. The Bengals, they're the Bengals. The Panthers, I think the offensive line is terrible. And see, I don't think that you could find a power rankings, if they did them back then, from 1970 to 1990, where you would have a team in the top 5, and you would say their offensive line is terrible. Because they wouldn't have been in the top 5 if their offensive line was terrible.
Well, and then that leads to a whole another conversation when you start getting into the offensive lines, defensive lines back from then to obviously to now. It's just a whole different world. It is an absolute whole different world when you talk about offensive line play. That has changed. In my opinion, that has changed
more than anything.
More than anything in over the years. The offensive line play is terrible, and so therefore, that's why we are where we're at now with football, and you just, the offensive line play, just, you can't win. You can't win with you. Back in the day, let me start over. Back in the day, you were not going to win with mediocre offensive line play. Now
you can get away with it by throwing the ball quick and splitting out 5 receivers.
Yeah, and you see a lot of teams that are getting away with mediocre line play, and to me, that's why when you watch some of these games, they're hard to watch, because they're really just the line play is just so god awful. and there's defensive lines that we talk about being really good, but now put them back into the 70s, would they be all that good?
Yeah, the only defensive lines I think you have that would be really good back in the 70s, maybe the Texans if J.J. Watt gets back to where he was, but you got the Bengals and the Rams, because I think Geno Atkins, Aaron Donald, Carlos Dunlap, guys like that, you can put them at any time and they can play. But there's very few teams like that now.
Yes, and so unfortunately, I mean, this is where we're at. Football has changed drastically, and now, like I said, it is very hard to watch. It really is. It's hard to watch these teams that they're not very good in any way, shape, or form. The word that, everyone wants to use, parody, that I just say is, mediocre. You're constantly watching, mediocre football. All the games that we picked together. I mean, let's be honest. How many of these games, really, to be honest, are you going to watch? And quite frankly, it's two mediocre teams. I mean, you go through the schedule, and honestly, there's so much mediocrity there. They're not. It's not enjoyable to watch. And that's where we're at. I mean, that really is where we're at right now. The NFL is very mediocre, and until that changes, quite frankly, I don't know that we're going to get, we're going to ever see football the way we saw it. But I mean, boy, it'd be nice to at least see it to be somewhat better than it is now.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see that. If anything, they'll expand more teams and thin out the talent pool even more. All right, guys, we're going to wrap the show up. Next week, Brian, will you be cruising and can't be on?
I will be.
How you be in Miami?
I should be good. I should be good. I should be in Miami, yeah.
All right, so you can join us from Brian's tropical Miami Beach location next Tuesday night at 9:30. Tony Pike, former Carolina Panther, will be back. Matt Andruscavage will be back. You can hear the Indiana basketball show tomorrow night with myself, Steve Risley, Colin Hartman, former Indiana basketball player Robbie Eggers, who played 94 through 98, I believe it was, will be on this show to talk about his time with the Hoosiers. We'll also look back at the Hoosier hysteria that happened about a week and a half ago. Colin was there, so we'll check that out. Tomorrow night, me and Robert Drummond will be back with the CFL Weekly Pick'em Show at 9:30. Brian will be in flight to Miami by then, so he won't be on with us. So make sure you check us out there. Yep. And then at some point, Thursday night, I believe it is, we'll have the Inside Boxing Weekly Show. All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up for tonight. I want to remind you, you can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, Spotify, iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Brian Schmidt, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.